All right, we're live. Episode 4 of the Daily Grind Golf Podcast. Today, I want to just go talk about kind of just the future of golf in general. Hoping that we got HD video finally, we got high quality audio, a little bit of different environment, and just wanted to talk about golf. There's just so much going on with Live and PGA and potential mergers and new mergers. And I want to talk about what I feel like would be a really cool ending to this. A lot of people talking about if the PIF gets involved, when if and when they get involved, what that looks like. Do we keep the PGA Tour kind of doing their own thing and then Live kind of lives independently in this small portion of the season? What does that all look like? Nobody knows. Maybe somebody is starting to know what that's going to look like, but I just don't foresee these big investment bodies, some of which that know so much about sports, very lucrative sports groups and franchises. I don't foresee them getting involved with the PGA Tour and just saying, yeah, let's take this 100-year-old, what seems to be failing sport, and keep that kind of the same, and then put the new version, which is like Live, in this small little section in the fall. I don't see that happening. I think it's going to be the complete opposite of that. And I think it should be. And so you're kind of on one spectrum or the other. You're either just like a big PGA Tour fan, which I am, and you think you should keep a PGA Tour format, or you're a Live fan, which I also am, and you think it should be more kind of geared toward what Live is going toward in this team format. A couple other podcasts I listen to, they're always kind of going back and forth, or kind of going down the road that they see this going. And one particular podcast I listen to a lot is The First Cut. And Kyle Porter once in a while mentions this burn it down and just start over. And that is what I think needs to happen. And I'm just going to go off on a long tangent here, or hopefully a short tangent, and just kind of tell you what I think would be really cool for the future of golf. You have all these sports. You have the NBA, you have Major League Baseball, you have the NFL. And when you just look at these franchises, I think you have to gear golf towards something like that. A franchise that is watchable in a small segment, or a game that's watchable and in a small amount of time. A franchise that are tied to something, a city, and they have an owner, and they have multiple players, more players than what you need to actually play in an event, because you need substitutes. And I think the way this starts is you get the PIF, and you get this new sports group that is investing in the PGA, and you get the PGA, and you get Live, and you get them all together, and you say, we are going to start completely from scratch. Step one would be, in the way I see this, is like I'm kind of mirroring this off of these other leagues that I just mentioned, that everybody knows and that everybody raves about and is crazy about. And that's where I'm going to take this conversation. Step one is these huge investors that know so much about sports and know all these big people and all these very wealthy people. They go around the world and they say, who wants to buy a professional golf franchise? And you get someone to invest in a franchise in Arizona, and you get someone to invest in a franchise in California, and you get two people to invest in a franchise in Florida, and you get multiple franchises signed up in Europe, and you get multiple franchises signed up in Asia, and you get a franchise signed up in South America and Australia. And you go around and you have these people buy into these franchises. Much easier said than done. I understand that, but this is just a theory. And then, I don't know how you start a brand new sport, but maybe these teams can pick some players. Like, let's say an Arizona franchise has Tony Finau and it has John Rahm, and that's it for the start. And maybe a Texas franchise has Scotty Scheffler and it has Jordan Spieth, and that's like their first two players. And they sign them to a contract, and it's a guaranteed deal for X number of years, and they're on that team. And they're going to have hometown fans and their hometown players in a franchise that's tied to the city, that's tied to the state, that can have apparel, and you can branch into all these other money making aspects. But you get all these franchises and you have all these owners and you get players signed up. And then to fill out the rest of the rosters for all these teams, you have a draft. And the teams start drafting players and you fill out these rosters in a draft. And then you're getting into fantasy stuff and you're getting into betting stuff, just like all these other sports that are making all this money down these other avenues, and not just related to like TV contracts and things like that. And then you fill these teams out and they're going to have 5 or 6 players on a team. And you're going to have swings. It's going to be a global tour. There's going to be franchises all around the world. And you're going to have a North American swing, and you're going to have a South American swing. North American home teams would be like Canadian teams, a Mexican team, a handful of United States teams. Then you're going to have a South America swing, maybe South America. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and they were talking about how nice it'd be to play some golf in South America, in when it's winter in North America. Makes sense. Then you're going to have a European swing, and these guys are going to go play for a few weeks in Europe. And you're going to have an Asian swing, and they're going to go play for a couple weeks over there. You're going to have an Australian swing. And these teams of 5 to 6 players are going, and now that we'll just kind of get into the actual playing of the golf, it's 100% focused on teams. There's no individuals. And you get, let's say, John Rahm's Arizona team is going up against Scotty Scheffler's Texas team, and they meet in Texas. It's an away game for Arizona. It's a home game for Texas. Maybe the home team gets to decide, are we doing stroke play? Are we doing match play? Okay. It's going to be 4 guys on 4 guys. And here's where I agree and disagree with some other people as well. They say it's got to be 72 holes. Sure, I agree with that. Each team needs to play 72 holes. And you got 4 guys playing on one team and 4 guys playing on another team, and they all play 18 holes. That adds up to 72. Should work for everybody if you want 72 holes. And there's also other guys. There's 2 other guys, let's say, on the bench, and they can sub in between holes. Let's not say during a hole, but just like football and soccer and baseball and all these other sports, you got guys that can sub in and out of the game. Nobody has a problem with that at all. And then if you have somebody injured, you have somebody play for them, and they're sitting the week out. But then you have a situation where my favorite players, Hovland. Let's say there was a European team that was Hovland and Ludwig and Vincent Norman. Hovland and Vincent Norman, 2 of my favorite golf players right now. And then you add Ludwig, and then you get 2 other guys that they pick up in the draft. I'm going to want to watch every game that they play, every match that they play. They could play a match in Texas against Scotty's team on a Tuesday, and then that airs Tuesday night. And maybe that's streamed. That's another thing where I have a really hard time these days with the streaming, because for me to get Peacock to watch 2 hours of golf over the course of a week is crazy. But if I can get Peacock and stream every match that Hovland plays with his team, and I can come home and watch those games on demand anytime that I want, I would do that in a second. But I'm not going to pay for a streaming service to watch my favorite player hit 2 shots over the course of 2 hours and watch 100 other guys hit a bunch of shots that I don't care about. Right? I care about it, but I want to see my favorite players play. And so now we're kind of just talking about the actual match itself. You have 4 guys going up against 4 guys. And let's say we're dealing with stroke play. Guy one and so person one on one team and person one on another team are going to tee off. They are going to start heading down the fairway after they tee off. However, get some carts out there. And you don't have to have the carts driving around the golf course all over the place, but have the cart take them from point A to point B, drive them 300 yards, 350 yards through the trees, up the cart path to the first ball. How much time is that going to save us in golf? And then they have another 200-yard shot, and they're going to head across the fairway instead of down the fairway. They're going to hop in the cart and they're going to take them up to the green. We have now saved these guys from walking 500 yards on every single hole. And it's going to save so much time. The carts don't have to be very visible in the broadcast. They can kind of be tucked into the trees, but have the guys walk 50 yards to the cart and then zoom them up instead of having these guys walk 500 yards on every single hole. It just takes so long. And then it would allow them to take more time when they're over the ball and they need to think about their shot. Their caddy can still be there, helping them with the yardages and the shots and the clubs and this and that. But get these guys from point A to point B a little bit faster. And then I think you have a shot clock, a huge clock next to the green. And maybe it's 12 minutes, maybe it's 15 minutes, something like that. And it's not an individual player that's on the clock. It's those guys playing that hole are on the clock. From the time the last guy tees off, that clock starts. They have 15 minutes to both get the ball in the hole. If they can't do that, maybe they get a warning the first time. Just both the guys, hurry up. It's slow play warning. Maybe they even get a second one if they have one. And then maybe after the second one, the officials are now watching those guys a little closer. And maybe an individual is on a clock with an official. And then if they have another slow play problem, then they can decide, hey, let's give a 1-stroke penalty, or it could even be a half a stroke penalty to whoever it is that's causing that slow play and speed this thing up. But after those guys tee off on the first hole, then you have player 2 from each team tee off 10 minutes after them. And players 3 and 4 from each team are teeing off on the back 9. Okay. And that's all you have for that game that day. Those 2 teams are playing on that course. And there's 2 teams playing on some course somewhere else. And there's 2 teams playing on some course somewhere else, all throughout North America, just like football, just like basketball, just like baseball. And it could be Monday night, it could be Tuesday night, it could be Saturday. And at the end of the round, you add up how many strokes each team had, and it's just a full team match. One team wins, the other team loses. You get the shot clock out there, you get the carts hidden in the trees, kind of off to the sides of the fairway, and you have these guys play 18 holes in 3.5 to 4 hours. And you also have a team playing 72 holes in less than 4 hours. And I can go and sit down and watch that match when I get home from work and stream it and play on demand and fast forward through the commercials. And I can watch this whole entire thing maybe in less than 3 hours. In the time that my kids watch a movie, I might be able to watch 72 holes of golf on the TV in the basement and watch every shot that Hovland and Vincent Norman and Ludwig Aberg hit that whole entire day. And you have these swings, and you have a North American swing, and then they go play in Europe, and they're just keeping track of records. And you decide who the best teams are. And after 12 weeks of a regular season, Then they go into, or maybe 16 weeks, or I don't know how many weeks of a regular season. Then they go into a playoff. And let's say you have a 3-week playoff and it's single elimination, just like some of these other playoffs, or maybe it's best of 3 rounds of golf that these guys need to play. And then you have a championship game eventually. That is kind of my take on how that could work. In with also I was saying like the roster is like 5 or 6 guys. You can substitute people out. Maybe someone's injured. Maybe you don't get to see your favorite player play because he's injured. Just like baseball, basketball, whatever. Maybe on some particular hole, Scotty gets subbed in for somebody else, or Scotty gets subbed out for somebody else because that hole fits a different person better. And these teams are subbing people in and out, and they're using their full roster for the full game. You're keeping things going fast, and it just turns into like an actual sport that we're all used to watching, because it's really hard. I just kicked my camera there. It's just really hard to continue seeing golf the way it's going right now. The PGA Tour's got issues, Live has issues, but the NFL is doing pretty good, and Major League Baseball is doing okay, and basketball is doing pretty good. And I think golf, if they tried to mirror that in a way, it would be really, really nice. And let's talk about apparel, for example. You have these teams tied to franchises that are tied to cities that have a hometown appeal, and people are rooting for their hometown guys, or their guys that are from their state, and they have team names that are cool, and they have team logos that are cool, and you can buy their stuff. I mean, if Hovland and these guys, a European team, had a team and a logo, I'd go on and buy a hat, and I'd go on and buy a hoodie for that particular team. But when I went to the PGA Championship this year in Chicago, and I go walk around the giant apparel tent, there's people in there like going crazy over buying a shirt that has a PGA Tour and a BMW logo on it, and it costs $80 or $100 for a polo. And I just didn't understand that. I walked in there, me and my wife walked around, and we kind of separated a little bit. She went one way, I went the other way. 5 minutes later, we kind of meet back in the middle, and it's just like, I don't know, there's just nothing here that I find interesting. It'd be the equivalent of, I'm from Wisconsin, so I go to a Bucks game, and all the apparel in the apparel shop is just Pfizer Form apparel. That would be crazy. Everybody would be walking around in there going like, what is this? Why isn't there any Bucks stuff? I would love to walk into that shop at a PGA Tour event and get a t-shirt that has John Rahm in his huge, like, cartoonized Masters game face on the shirt that says Rombo. When we watched the Masters last year, and when I say we, I mean my family and my kids were like, what is going on with John Rahm? Look at his face. Like, he was just so incredibly serious. And I was like, that would be such a cool face to put on a shirt. But you can't do that because they don't the PGA doesn't own the rights to John Rahm to do that, because they're these, let's say independent contractors, but they're part of a franchise. Get that stuff on a shirt, make it interesting. Give me a team shirt to buy. Give me a Max Homa something to buy. Give me a Hovland something to buy. I think that would be huge. Completely focused on team events, have drafts, have leagues. And that brings up one other thing that I want to talk about as well. But get these things more in line with what all these other successful sports look like today. And then, so I think like what I just all explained, I think is like what live turns into. And whether it's called live or whether it's not called live, let's just say that's what live turns into is these franchises with five or six guys that are all tied to cities, and there's a big season and there's playoffs, and in individual games there's substitutes, and it's moving faster, and it's still 72 holes, and there's a shot clock, and it's just different but much more individualized in terms of getting fans to watch golf and follow their favorite players. And then what does the PGA turn into? I think it kind of stays like the same. You have 125 guys on the PGA Tour. All the purses have to get smaller. There's no more signature events. You just have a PGA Tour event, let's say every other week for 10 months. And to be totally honest, the PGA Tour eventually essentially like turns into a play-in tour. It would be like the new AAA. Okay. It kind of turned into like what the Corn Ferry Tour is now. The Corn Ferry Tour then turns into AA. And maybe these franchises have guys on the new PGA Tour that's doing these events every other week, just the same format that they're doing it now. And if there's a couple injuries on one of these teams, they can call up players from the PGA Tour that they have signed onto their franchise, and they can play golf. And maybe they win an event with those guys. And maybe they say, hey, we're keeping this guy on the roster. And maybe somebody gets sent back to the PGA Tour from the team. And there's this come and go, just like in baseball. You got professional baseball, you got AAA, you got AA. That's kind of what I envision the PGA Tour turning into. And then there was one other thing, and I think that, and then it brings up kind of the question of majors. It's like, well, how would you ever know who would play in the majors? I guess one thing I would say right off the start is that the best players in football and baseball and basketball don't always play in the championship. And I know it's going to be very hard to swallow, and it is for me too, but maybe if John Rahm's team is no good and losing all their games, maybe none of that team gets into, let's say, the Masters. Because I think a cool way to figure out who plays the majors, besides keeping a lot of the qualifications that they have now, like John Rahm would be in, he's a winner. So past winners, official world golf ranking stuff would have to adjust, but maybe they can figure out how to still rank these players in terms of like individual scores that they have on the course. I don't know. It's pretty contradictory to what I was just talking about, because I'm getting along the lines of nothing is individual. But the majors is kind of a more difficult conversation, and maybe a different conversation for another day. But maybe you take the segment of the season that happens before the Masters, and you decide who are the best 2 or 4 teams or 6 teams, and they all get in. And then maybe you say who's been the best performing players on the next 6 teams, and maybe the top player of the next 6 teams gets in. And then there's still all these other qualifications that they have in place, and old people have won in the past, and the majors always get in. And then before the next major, a month later, they take all the team events in the month that happened before the PGA Championship. They say, who's the best teams? They get in. Who's the best players on the next teams down the line? And the top player from the next list of teams, they get in. And they do this on a monthly basis, and they figure out what teams are the best, what players are the best. They're getting into the majors. And maybe there's even a way to figure out these PGA Tour players who are now this like AAA league. Who's the top 5 players from that group? They get in. Something like that. But that is my version of the burn it all down, start it all over future of golf. if you listen to this whole entire thing, thank you very much. I've just wanted to say this to somebody. My wife couldn't care less, and my kids don't want to hear about it. So I wanted to throw it out there. I just love I don't like all the back and forth stuff right now, but I do like the idea of thinking about to just burn it down and start over. And that's kind of the way I see it. I think it would be super cool. But if you have made it this far, leave a comment. Let me know what you think and take it from there. Thanks, guys.